Good morning, everybody. My name is Damien O'Reilly, and you are very welcome along to the Festival of Farming and Food, because it is Science Week, and this week-long of events is being organised free for all of us by the Science Foundation of Ireland in association with Teagasc. And we're going to be here every morning this week at this time, chatting about different issues in relation to food and animals and plants, and it's all to do with science. And we have wonderful experts lined up right throughout the week. So this morning, what we're going to focus on is the sustaining of plant diversity into the future. That is the title of this morning's program, which will run for the next hour or so. And we're delighted that we will have the expertise of many of the staff from the National Botanic Gardens in Glasnevin in Dublin, which of course is also home to the Teagasc College of Amenity Horticulture. So later on, we'll be chatting to some of the staff there. And you can get involved as well, because if you go to the bottom of your screen, you can ask questions, or you can go on social media and you can use the hashtag FestFarmFood. And you can do that by going on to the Teagasc Twitter handle at Teagasc. It's simply like that. So we'd be delighted to hear from you. We're going to be chatting to those people a little bit later on. They're standing by. Good morning to you all. And I know you're really looking forward to the chat we're going to have a little bit later on. Now, we're going to email all you participants that are taking part in this event this morning. We're going to send you a little email later. We want to get your feedback. So we'd be absolutely delighted if you can fill that in and return it later on. Now, I was at the National Botanic Gardens a little bit earlier on, in fact, a couple of weeks ago. It really is an oasis of calm in the middle of a bustling city. Not right now, because of course we're in lockdown, but in general, it is a wonderful place. I don't know whether you've ever been to the National Botanic Gardens, but it's not just a place that you go to have a walk around. There's also a lot of work going on there in relation to research and recreation and education on the safeguarding of plants into the future. And we, as I said, we'll be hearing a little bit more about that later on. But first of all, we're going to play a little short video for you. Well, in fact, it's about 15 to 20 minutes long or so, when I visited there a little while ago. So sit back and take a look at this. Hello there, my name is Damien O'Reilly, and you're very welcome to the National Botanic Gardens here in Glasnevin in Dublin. In fact, I'm right here in the Teagasc College for Amenity Horticulture, and we're talking about sustaining plant diversity into the future. It's the title as part of Science Week. And the beautiful gardens here, they're about more than just recreation. It's about conserving threatened plants. It's about learning more into the research of conserving plants, and it's also about educating future gardeners. So we're here today to talk to some of the staff at the Botanic Gardens and indeed in the Teagasc College as well. It seems so strange that water can actually flow upwards on a tree, because it seems that it would defy the laws of physics.
Exactly. One of the extraordinary things is you can pick a bunch of flowers and we can put them in a pot of water, and they will sit there for several weeks, staying alive, sucking the water up through tiny little pores in their stems. And yet trees defy the laws of physics, because there comes a limit to how high you can suck water. So if you took a straw and put it in a glass of water and sucked the water up, that's easy enough. But imagine if that straw was a meter long. Now you've got a whole sort of meter of water, this great column of water, and it's starting to get heavier. It's harder to pull up. Now, if you imagine a tree such as a giant sequoia, 100 meters tall, it is a phenomenal problem, because here is the rub. The real problem lies on, if you set up a steel or glass pipe and you started sucking water up it with a very powerful pump, there comes a point at 10 meters, just 10 meters, where that water starts to boil. It boils at room temperature, that ambient temperature, because water cannot rise higher than 10 meters, because that is a perfect vacuum above it. So how on earth does water get up 100 meters? And this was a problem that presented itself to both botanists and physicists for many years. And 100 years ago, in Trinity College, two professors, a professor of physics, John Joly, and the professor of botany, Henry Dixon, sat about devising a theory. They came up with a theory which goes with the rather cumbersome name of the cohesion tension theory. And it covers two aspects of water. One is cohesion. Cohesion is what holds things together. So water is held together. Water molecules are remarkable because they are polar molecules. Unlike many other liquids we know, a molecule of water with its two hydrogen atoms and its oxygen atom has a positive pole and a negative pole. And this means that the two molecules next door to one another are bonded together by something we refer to as a hydrogen bond. And these molecules are therefore held together with great strength. It gives water this extraordinary feature of having surface tension. You can float, if you take a little bit of paper and you put a paper clip on it and float that in a glass of water, the paper will sink and the paper clip will stay floating, even though it's made of metal and is heavier than the water. And this effect of cohesion that the water has enables water molecules in this tree to literally be pulling one molecule after another from the ground upwards. Now, critics of this theory said, that's like believing in ropes made of sand, that as soon as you pull this little column of water, it should snap, it should break at 10 meters above ground level. The fact that it can go to 100 meters in height is because as each molecule of water evaporates from a leaf, it literally pulls the next molecule up, and that molecule in turn pulls the molecule behind, and there is a chain of water molecules from the top of this tree right down to the roots, pulling each molecule one after another. And that is how this tree achieves the feat of defeating the scientific fact that a physicist would say water cannot be pulled higher than 10 meters above ground level.
My name is Dr. Paul Fitters. I'm a lecturer here in the College of Amenity Horticulture, the Teagasc College of Amenity Horticulture here in the National Botanic Gardens.
So Paul, tell me a little bit more about your journey to the Botanic Gardens.
Okay, I'm originally from Holland, where I studied horticulture in Wageningen University. And then I got a job in Maynooth College to work on black vine weevil, which is a troublesome pest. In biological controlling that pest with worms. And then in 2003, I applied for the job here in the National Botanic Gardens and got it. And I have been here ever since. Okay, I'm going to graft a sorbus today, the Sorbus commixta dodong. Up onto a rootstock from another sorbus. But before you do anything, you need to have a sharp knife. So this is my grafting knife and a sharpening tool. And I'm just going to sharpen it. And then once on the back, because this bit should be flat and this bit should be beveled. The next thing is then, or the second thing is your sorbus rootstock. So this is a seedling of a sorbus. Nothing special, although it has a little bit of autumn color. And I'll just chop off the top. So it has a nice root system, very strong stem. And on top of this, I'm going to put this new sorbus that is grown for its beautiful autumn color, dodong. So then we go to the Sorbus commixta dodong, the cultivar that I'm going to graft on top of this tree. And this is the shoot I took from that tree, and I need to have as much surface area as I can to connect it to the tree there. So the trick to graft is put the knife in very flat, put your thumb on the other side of the wood, and then effectively pull out from your shoulders. So no carving, it should be a smooth movement. And if you do that, you get a very relatively long cut that should be perfectly flat. The next thing is to match this to this. And as I said, it's a bit of carpentry. This stem is much thinner than this one. So I'm going to take a sliver off the rootstock to match this. And in order to know how far I need to cut, I'm going to hold this against it. So the length is roughly to here. Put my knife in and take a sliver off. Check if it's the same width. It can be slightly wider. And this is a fairly good match. The next thing to do is make this workable. At the moment, it's quite long, and I only need 3, at most 4 buds. So in this case, I'm going to go 3 buds. So I'm going to take the top off, take a piece of rubber, and see if I can tie this in. So to tie in the rubber band, it's just a rubber band. It needs to be very tight, so you pull it, hold it on top of the signwood, go around both of them so that they're tied together. Do that twice, then go to the bottom of the signwood. And then the last time, I'll put my finger in between. So when I come around again, I can roll the rubber band down and it's caught. And then you have a nice firm sorbus. So this is my deep fat fryer, and there's this special wax in it, and it's just melted. So I'm going to give it a quick dip just to cover it, only the union bit and the top, the cyanwood, and then straight away out. Yeah, so here it goes. Okay, you can see the whole surface has been waxed. And when the tree grows out next spring, it'll just crack the wax and it'll grow out of it. So these buds hopefully will form the basis of the new tree. So grafting is really a process of carpentry, and you can do it at home, but be aware of the sharp knives and possible injuries, so be very careful.
My name is Felicity Gaffney, and I'm Head of Education here at the National Botanic Gardens. I manage the guide service, and we develop different education programs for children, adults, and all the school groups come in as well. And I also manage the events and the exhibition programs. People just love a green space, and I think particularly in the first lockdown, people really began to engage with nature and slow down a little bit and actually look around and appreciate nature more. And where better to do it than here, really?
So Felicity, we actually do have our very own rainforest here.
Yes, we have Ireland's only tropical rainforest, and it's in the Great Palm House. And that's actually a big glass house that we'll be in. And it is full of giant palm trees, the fastest growing bamboo in the world, and all sorts of plants from the tropics, from Brazil to Africa to all around the world.
You're going to tell me a little bit more about the palm tree.
The palm tree is a super crop. It is the most important plant, economic plant from the tropics. We've all heard of palm oil, and maybe we don't think so much about it here, but it's in absolutely almost everything that we eat. It's in crisps, it's in lipstick, it's in shampoo, it's in chocolate, it sets ice cream. It's in absolutely everything.
And palm oil is something that all of us use in our daily lives.
Yeah, and incredibly, 70% of all personal care products are derived from palm oil derivatives, which is something that we just don't think about. Often they're not even labeled. So it's a wonder crop. It's a fantastic crop. 3 billion people use it. And each individual uses up to 8 kgs a year, which is quite an incredible amount to think about. And that's spaced over 350 countries. Palm trees are grown in massive, massive plantations. And obviously they harvest the fruit and the kernel from it.
So where do these palm trees grow commercially?
Originally, palm trees grew natively in South Africa. And then in the times of the colonies, they were brought over to Malaysia and Indonesia, and massive plantations came out of that. Now, ironically, 85% of the palm oil that's produced in the world is grown in those two countries. It covers over 10% of the total global land that's used for crops. is devoted to palms and growing palm trees. Of course, this has been great news economically for these countries because it has given a lot of export material, created a lot of employment, and people are feeling, you know, in some cases very happy about it, but there has been a cost. The cost is to the environment, first of all, because in order to grow these plantations, obviously land is needed. So what has happened traditionally is that virgin rainforest has been clear felled or burnt to the ground, and the plantations come in, and that's fine. However, the impact that would have, first of all, as we can realize, would be biodiversity loss, because all of the plants and the different animals that would have lived in these forests now are facing devastation, destruction, and extinction. And these include the orangutan, the Sumatran tiger, and the Sumatran rhino.
Is anything being done in these countries to try and protect the habitats of the orangutan, for example?
People now are becoming more aware, and there's no point in just saying we're not going to use palm oil anymore, because that's going to have devastating effects on the economies of the people. We don't want to take away their livelihoods either. However, there are two things that's happening at the moment. The first thing is, it's a board called the RSPO. That's the Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil Production. And obviously that speaks for itself. They try to have sustainable production that is so that the palm oil that you're buying or is in your foods and all those other products comes from sustainable means and people-friendly means. The other thing is work has been done on genetic signature of new palms. So selecting all the different palms and selecting the best palms that will give the best yield. At the moment, the best yield that they can get is 6 tons of oil per palm, but some palms have been known to double this. So the idea is that they will select these better yielding palm trees and replace the older ones as they die off with these. And the result of this will be less forest will need to be clear felled.
I'm Colin Kelleher, so I'm the keeper of the Herbarium and the molecular lab in the National Botanic Gardens. So what we do in the Herbarium is curate over 600,000 specimens of dried plants. And then in the molecular lab, we look at genetic diversity of those plants, or some of those plants.
Can you explain to me, what is plant genetic diversity?
Plant genetic diversity then would be the variation in the individual genes inside in the plants. So essentially, genes are the building blocks of diversity. And then even down from that, you have the individual base pairs of the DNA. And really, it's investigating that variation to try and look for patterns or to look for evolutionary lineages and to try and understand plants and also to try and characterize them in a group, sort of a grouping or a relationship. So these are some of the species that we're working on: Alder, Birch and Oak. You can see the alder and the birch have their catkins on, ready for the spring. If we're sampling for the oak, all that we need to do is take a single leaf and then we label that up, put it in an envelope and put it into silica gel. So this is a bag of silica gel and we put it into the bag of silica gel. This is basically it's biochemically inactive then. So it'll store in the silica gel forever. And then we have a tissue bank that we keep all these samples in that they can be used in future if they're needed. So this is the DBM Plant Molecular Lab in the National Botanic Gardens. And so we took a sample then of oak, and we have multiple samples all across Ireland. And so what we do in here is then we take a small piece of that leaf and put it into a tube, break up the plant material, extract out the DNA, and then we look for sequence differences. And we use various different molecular markers to look for sequence differences. With this sequence, you can see that these dots here show you differences in the entire sequence. Within the sequence variation, we look for patterns to match up Irish populations with European populations. And we also look at the diversity within Irish populations to see how variable they are. And by doing that, we hope to further understand what variability is within Irish populations, and then use that for future monitoring and for conservation of forest genetic resources into the future.
So here we have the Aloe Ferox. Ferox comes from the Latin word for fierce. Just taking a look at this plant, you can see it's covered in spines on the upper and underside of the beautiful leaves. So the story I'm going to talk about is how important science is for the lives of people. This plant is a very, very important plant in South Africa for the livelihoods of thousands of people. This is in the aloe family, so it is related to aloe vera. Aloe vera is grown commercially. However, this plant, 95% of it is harvested in the wild. It is indigenous to southern Africa. So inside these leaves, we have a bitter juice, sometimes called the bitter aloe. And this is used medicinally. So people say that it has antimicrobial, anti-inflammatory, and even anti-cancer properties. We can also harvest gel from the plant. So that's used in cosmetics, very much like aloe vera would be. In South Africa, some of the most poor and undereducated, I suppose, people rely on this plant for survival. A study was done on the households in the Eastern Cape that rely on this plant, and they found that in 21 out of 22 households there where people harvest the plant, that was their primary income. The people collecting the plant were middle-aged women, so they were supporting their family by harvesting this plant in the wild. This plant is very important for people's livelihood. It's important in itself. We need to protect it. And so with that in mind, it is listed on an international convention that protects endangered species of flora and fauna, so plants and animals. This international convention is called CITES for short. So that's a convention on the trade of endangered species. So this plant is listed, and that means that its trade is restricted. That would seem at first glance to be a very good idea, but there is a lot of nuance to this. Initially, it was listed on the second appendix of CITES. So that means it's not in danger of extinction, but it is protected. And that meant that to export and import the plant, you needed a license. That does make the industry for these people who rely on it almost impossible because it's so expensive to get the license. So 4 delegates from South Africa came to this conference, the big World Wildlife Conference in Geneva, and they had to persuade the people making the decision who were voting that this plant needed to have a sort of amendment made in this convention because the industry was so important to the livelihoods of so many people. So what they proposed was that the trade of the plant itself and the raw extract would be under some restrictions, but that the export of the finished product would be open. Previously, the raw juice was exported and it was processed mostly in Europe and North America. But now this new ruling encourages the processing to take place in South Africa. So that should help their economy as well. And so that was a big decision to make because this plant hasn't been fully assessed. We're not exactly sure of the population, how healthy it is in the wild, whether or not the population is healthy enough to be sustainable. So that needs further review. So that is really one of the examples of why conservation botany is so important, because it doesn't just affect the plant, it affects the whole system. And so one of our botanists here was present at that conference, Dr. Nolan Smith. She was one of the 10 people who basically got to decide the future of the harvesting of this plant. So the harvesters traditionally don't harvest all the leaves from a plant. They know that they must leave some and that they must let it regenerate. In a good day, they'll collect about 1,000 leaves when the conditions are right, and they might get 20 to 25 litre buckets full of sap. So I'm going to show you what the sap looks like now. I'm going to cut into one of these leaves of our Aloe Verox.
Well, thank you very much for that. That was a great video that was put together a few weeks ago in the National Botanic Gardens in Glasnevin. And thanks indeed to all the staff there and to the OPW for their help in putting that together in these rather tough times. And please God, very soon, we'll all be able to go and visit the Botanic Gardens back in normal times. By the way, if you'd like to maybe pursue a career in horticulture, or if you'd like to do a part-time course at the Teagasc Amenity Horticulture College there, you can find out more by going to teagasc.ie. Now, some of the people that you saw on the video there are now joining us. Hello, everybody. Are you all there, guys? Good morning. Good morning. I'm going to introduce them to you now. But before that, I want to let you know that at the bottom of your screen, there is the little Q&A facility. So you will have an opportunity to put questions to our panelists, whom I'm going to introduce to you now presently. Dr. Matthew Jebb is the director of the National Botanic Gardens of Ireland, and you saw him. We also have Felicity Gaffney, who's the head of education at the National Botanic Gardens. Dr. Colin Kelleher, whom you saw there as well, he's the keeper of the National Herbarium. Dr. Nolan Smith is the National Botanic Gardens Conservation Officer. And last but not least, Paul Fritters, who we saw in the video from Holland. He's a lecturer at the Teagasc College of Amenity Agriculture. Good morning to you all. Can you hear me loud and clear?
Yes.
Loud and clear, Damien.
Yes.
That's
morning,
good.
Damien.
Wow. These mad times it's crazy times that we're in, but isn't it wonderful in this Science Week that we can actually have an event like this? And it's great to have so many participants involved as well. And thanks for your help in putting that video together. Matthew, I might go to you first, because obviously when I met you a few weeks ago, I was fascinated by this idea of the water going up the trees, and you did a great job in explaining it to us. Why are sequoia trees so tall?
I suppose when they originally evolved, dinosaurs would have been the prominent herbivorous animals on Earth. And one idea is a lot of these ancient conifers, which were the first seed plants on the planet Earth, probably evolved height as a simple way of defeating herbivores grazing on them. So being a tree has got that enormous advantage that you've got your edible leaves very high up above the ground level. Now, of course, smaller plants have different issues with grazing animals, but this is a matter of what we refer to as co-evolution, that as things graze or eat plants, plants evolve means to evade predation. And this is what has led to the sheer diversity of plants on our planet.
What are the tallest trees in Ireland, Matthew?
Probably the tallest we've got at the moment would be over 40 meters in height.
Wow.
And a lot of that is simply to do with the winds that we experience in this country, mean that growing too tall can be very dangerous. If you've got a forest of other trees around you, that's your best form of protection. So as a conifer, you're retaining your leaves through the winter. It's a bit like sailing a ship, in a gale with all of your sails up. It's a bad idea. And indeed, sequoias have got the advantage of having very flexible stems, so they're able to cope with very high winds. But the biggest safety factor is being amongst other trees in a forest. A forest is a great way of protecting individual trees.
And this idea of the water climbing, it goes against everything in terms of nature and the laws of gravity and all that. It really is a fascinating area. And as you said earlier on, there's strong Irish connections into the science and the research into this.
I think one of the great pleasures of science is that everybody can practice it. Science is a way of looking at all the facts around us and formulating a theory into which they fit. So in the biological world, Darwin's great insight into the mechanism of evolution, that natural selection was at its base, is again a very simple idea. And yet it fits every single fact we've ever been able to discover about the natural world. And this is how science progresses. We find out facts and we tinker, we adjust our theories to best reflect what we think is going on.
And by the way, if you are on Twitter, go on to the, use the hashtag farm food if you have any questions or you want to make any points. And Matthew, I'll be coming back to you, obviously, and I'm going to move on shortly, but I'm fascinated. I mean, you've a great life. You've really lived the life, I suppose, of Riley, as they say, in terms of your interests. You've lived in quite exotic places, am I right?
Yes, I spent many years living in Papua New Guinea, and there I ran a research station for scientists. So that ticked all the boxes really of the sheer delight of studying natural history, the sheer number of scientists coming to Papua New Guinea to study plants and animals in that area, I found extremely stimulating. And I suppose, once you've become intrigued by biological science, you really have an interest in almost every aspect of the natural world. It gives you a great purpose in even going for a walk. You're surrounded by amazing sights and sounds. So working in a botanic gardens, all of us who work here, we take the sheer pleasure of what we derive from plants, and we like to share that if we can with our visitors. All right. And I love your background there, by the way, Matthew. Those are some big, tall trees. Exactly. Very appropriate. Colin Kelleher's there. Good morning to you, Colin.
Morning, Damien.
Oh, yeah. What a background you have as well. We'll give out a prize later on, I think. Our participants can vote for the best background. Very imaginative indeed. Yeah. But Colin, just in relation to herbarium, I'm wondering, what exactly is a herbarium and why is it important?
Okay, so I'm actually in the herbarium here. So these are all stacks of flat, dried plants. And it's kind of interesting. Generally, plants are two-dimensional. Mostly in terms of their function, they're two-dimensional. They're designed to absorb as much light as possible. And the only time they tend to get three-dimensional is when they interact with animals like fruit or something. Even a trunk, although you think it's a three-dimension, it's actually functionally just a two-dimensional thing. And so this is, you might be able to see it. So this is an example of a specimen. You can see just all these flattened specimens. So this is, we have about 600,000. I see someone asked a question there on the feed. We have about 600,000 specimens in the herbarium. But we still don't know for sure. And in fact, that's one of the major projects we're doing over the next few years. We're digitizing, we're establishing exactly what we have. And you might just see on the top there, we have a unique number on this specimen. And so we're basically giving every single thing a unique number. And the important thing as well about a specimen is, you might not see it clearly, but it has a label at the bottom. And the label basically tells you the who, what, when, where. So who collected it, what it is, where it was collected, and when it was collected. And this is really important in terms of us understanding where our plants grow. So it's key information for developing a census of plants. Like we have a census for humans every few years. We have the same for plants. We have this herbarium is maintaining those records. And the key thing as well about a herbarium is it's a physical specimen. So in years to come, we can go back to that physical specimen and look at it and even extract things from it. So we extract, say, DNA would be a major thing to extract from it. So we can go back to plants 200 years ago, we can take out DNA and look at what the genes were like then and compare them to what they were like now.
And I'm just wondering, do you interact with members of the public? Can I save a specimen? Can I send in specimens to you? Or how does that work?
Absolutely, absolutely. So we'd want a certain standard, obviously, but the who, what, when, where is the key things to have. Without those, it lacks provenance. It lacks a bit of bite, as it were. But yes, we have specimens from a whole variety of people. From just people who've found an interesting plant in their locality. Obviously, you don't just pick something that looks really rare. You make sure that it's not the only individual of it. But yes, we welcome people depositing specimens, and we'll advise them on how to do it exactly.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering, going back to, I suppose, kind of to my first question about its importance and relevance to have, all of these specimens stored there. as we move along, how does it help us, I suppose? How does it help civilization? How does it help the natural world in having this archive, you could call it, of specimens?
So I'll say two things. There's loads of different things. Like there's estimated 100 uses for a herbarium specimen. But one of the things is you probably can't see it here, but you will spot when you look through the specimens, you'll see some of them that have this little red tab on them. And they're deliberately with these red tabs to show that they're special. And this one is actually a dandelion. And what these specimens are they're the standard bearers for the names. So we have all these specimens scattered all over the world that are the standard bearers for the names. So when we think of a common name of oak, like pedunculate oak, you will find that then has its scientific name, which is Quercus robur, and that attaches to a herbarium specimen somewhere in the world. And so it's key to our naming of plants. That's one thing. But then in terms of our understanding, it's essential. These physical specimens, again, I mentioned about extracting DNA out of them, but you can go back into the past. You can essentially look into the past by looking at a specimen 200 years old. And this has been done by looking at these tiny little stomata, which are the air holes on the leaves. And they can give us an indication of the CO2 or the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere at different times. So the physical specimen is absolutely key, not only the record, but the physical specimen is something that we can always go back to.
And Colin, before I move on to Nolan, and I suppose this is a question nearly for all of you, but in relation to a lot of people that are participating this morning, I'm sure there are quite a lot of students and obviously people that have an interest in this area. How important is it that, people, that you have researchers into the future and you have people interested in studying all of this?
Well, basically plants are everything. In short, I mean, you could go into multiple different answers there, but everybody this morning will have eaten plants for breakfast. And even the milk that you had was from something that ate a plant. So not only aesthetically, when we look outside, they're really important for our environment, but they're absolutely key for our survival. And so in terms of studying them, the more people that study them, the better, so that we can fully understand and also not only understand plants in the wild, but also understand how to increase agricultural output and things like that. So there's lots of different avenues to what you can study in plant science.
All right, stay with us there, Colin. Thanks very much for that. Really sounds very, very interesting. And you're there, as I said, in the herbarium for us this morning. I want to move on to Nolan Smith. Hi, Nolan. Good morning to you.
Hi, everybody. How are you?
Very good. We were listening to your colleague there, obviously, earlier on in the video, and I just was wondering, what is the difference between Aloe Ferox and Aloe Vera?
Yeah, thanks to Charlotte for making that wonderful video in our cactus house. Sorry I couldn't be there. So I suppose you've seen Charlotte standing beside an Aloe Ferox, and here's my head beside an Aloe Vera. So the first thing you can kind of see is scale. So this one is a lot smaller. And another sense is Aloe Vera, this one is kind of like the Yorkshire Terrier. It's kind of like the tamed version. Horticulture has tamed it. So you can find Aloe Vera all over the world these days. So we've tamed it, but you will only find Aloe Ferox in South Africa. So that's why it's quite special. And I suppose when we talk about horticulture and sustainability into the future, the more plants we can tame through horticulture, the more people we have working in this area, the better it is for the planet. In a way, we take a lot of pressure off the natural environment. So obviously an Aloe Ferox as well, it's not only sustainability for environment, it's also sustainability for economics and for the people as well. So, so that's probably the difference. It's kind of like the Yorkshire Terrier versus the wolf. The wolf's in the wild, the Yorkshire Terrier is kind of in your sitting room. And the same with this Aloe Vera, yeah.
Yeah, it's a very interesting analogy there. And Charlotte, as you said, explained it very well earlier on. But like the amount of products, we're talking earlier on to Colin there about when we're eating our breakfast, we're eating something that's derivative of a plant, even if it's milk. But amazing the amount of products that include palm oil. And I know there has been some controversy about palm oil cultivation and the effects it has on nature and indeed on orangutans. So how can we be assured that, you know, when we're consuming a product that has palm oil in it, that it is sustainable?
I think Felicity spoke about the palm oil, so I don't know whether Felicity wants to jump in on that one. I know she has some ideas there.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, we'll come to Felicity in a moment. I am jumping a little bit ahead, but in terms, sorry, I said palm oil. I'm talking as well about aloe vera and products like that. So when it comes to sustainability, how can we be assured that we are buying products that are sustainable?
Okay.
I was using that. Sorry, I was using that as an excuse,
as an
which I'll come to Felicity about as well. But also, it's a question for yourself as well.
Yeah. Yeah, so as Charlotte said in the video, we work as the CITES Scientific Authority for Ireland. So of the 30,000 plants that are listed on this CITES appendix, you need a permit to export and a permit to import. So you can find out which ones are on this convention through Species Plus. But ideally, if you go to shopping yourself, a company should have obtained the permit. So if you find it for sale in the supermarket, the permits should have already been obtained. So it already has passed through the risk analysis, through all the authorities in the different countries. So that's like with the story of Aloe Ferox. The authorities in South Africa brought the case to the World Wildlife Conference and represented Ireland and the EU Plant Working Group, which I was doing there. We got to look at the data behind, you know, how many plants of Aloe Ferox are there, how much are you taking, how much is available for the future. So these are the kind of decisions that are taken at these kind of bigger meetings. But then you can look for things like Fair Wild, which looks, you know, if you look for little stickers like that, or anything that's organically produced. And I know, so things like that. So I suppose really, if it's in a product, the companies really should be doing their due diligence. They should be out tracing and making sure that's the case, you know, and customs will check on the way products in and out of the EU and in and out of Ireland that they actually have the correct paperwork. So if you buy Aloe Ferox, which is kind of a good thing to buy, you know, in the chemist, you know, that you are actually supporting livelihoods of people in South Africa. So this is the ideal. We want to make sure the resource is there for the future, and we want to make sure that there's enough there to sustain people in their natural environments as well. So it's a big thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And you did touch there on the importance of, you know, of this for livelihoods, particularly in South Africa. But can we be assured as well that, you know, workers' rights are not being abused as well?
Yeah, I mean, these are all the things companies who, luckily enough, I think as Ireland, we're part of the EU, and the EU have a very good kind of track record in this area. For example, if you're importing timber into the EU, there's a whole series of, you know, legality questions. So in their EU timber regulations. So being part of this kind of group, being part of the EU is very good for us in that we have this collective group of people looking at all our imports to the EU and making sure exactly that you know, that the people are being paid correct wages, that there's enough plants there to sustain, enough forests there to sustain for the future. So ideally, we should go down to our local supermarkets with confidence that everybody is doing their job on the chain. And if there is things that people kind of feel, well, oftentimes I go to the supermarket or I go to stores. I think there's a real health food buzz at the moment, and that's and I know I definitely have seen, you know, crazy things in supermarkets and health food stores that are plants that are really not from, you know, God, how they even got here. So it's kind of one of my favorite things is to go to stores and look for, you know, all these, you know, plants that have been imported and products that have been imported, because it's very easy for us to actually think about a plant, but there's so many products, you know, it's mind boggling. And, you know, there's a bit of a fad, you know, with health food stuff at the moment, that definitely there's products coming from all over the place.
Yeah. No, definitely. I think when we, you know, now when we're consuming food or material, you know, in general, when we're shopping for goods and particularly in food, we are more conscious now of where it's come from and how it's actually being produced. We still obviously concentrate on price, maybe over provenance, but we are becoming a little bit more informed. And I think this year has certainly taught us to appreciate where our food comes from a little bit more than maybe we did before, and how it's produced, and hopefully in an ethical and sustainable way. Just before I move on to Felicity, Nolan, we had a question in here on Instagram. I'm going to read it on the screen here as it came in. what are some native Irish plants that are yet to find a sustainable path that would also benefit us commercially?
I suppose I kind of looked into this a little bit. So I suppose biofuels, some of our willows are probably kind of one thing that maybe we could look at, you know, for that kind of thing. But one thing I'm present of recently, which is quite interesting, this block of brown. So seaweed is another very interesting one. And because we're surrounded by you know, wonderful seas, so we have a huge amount of seaweed species that are, you know, and I know it's been an industry talked about for a while, but I suppose we're yet to kind of fully maybe engage in that. Yeah.
Okay, by the way, I know there are some people are sending in questions. If we don't get to them, we will try and link you up with the people that you're asking questions of, and they will get back to you offline over the next day or two. I want to move on to Felicity. Good morning, Felicity.
Hello there.
Calling Felicity. How are you, Felicity?
I'm here. Fine. How are you?
Very good, and it was great to chat to you a couple of weeks ago back there in the Botanic Gardens. And again, I suppose I was getting a little bit mixed up there, but the question I was trying to put to both yourself and Nolan, and I'll put it to you now, is again on that issue of sustainability. And you spoke there about obviously, you know, how we can protect orangutans in their habitats. How can we be assured that they are not being, I suppose, attacked in this regard as the business kind of extracting oil is benefiting the rest of us?
Well, I suppose similar to what Nolan was saying, like the responsibility does land and fall with the consumer. So if we practice sustainable consumer techniques, that is going to have an impact right across the world. You know, it's very important for us to be aware of what we're buying. So if you're going to buy palm oil products, and it's very difficult not to, as we saw in the video, then you know, you can check it out. I went to my cupboard. I'm sure lots of people, I don't want to be like branding anything, but I went to my cupboard today to look at this because my kids, I can't stop them eating it. And everybody loves a bit of chocolate. But you'll find on this, for example, that this mentions that it comes from sustainable palm oil is used in the product. So if you start to look and be a little bit selective, there is that. And I think that's really important. And what Nolan was saying too, we need to be very careful when we're buying timber products, paper products, or palm oil products. So if we look for the FSC, which is the Forest Certificate certification grade, that explains to us, you'll see it on the back of a greeting card, you can see it lots of places, and that explains to us it's okay to buy this product because there are safeguards in place, as Nolan already discussed. So I think that's one of the things. The other thing we can do is raise awareness, especially if you're in school or you're a teenager or whatever, you raise awareness among your own network of friends simply by your actions. If you refuse a paper cup, now I know that's difficult in COVID, but post-COVID and pre-COVID, there was a great swell of action of people were using reusable cups and they were allowed to go into restaurants. As a matter of fact, they were being given bonus or extra discounts if they used their own cups. You know, small actions right across the board can make a huge difference. And that's what I think we need to be careful of, those kind of things. Also, you could join an NGO, which is a non-government organization. And there's lots of those that are available, the World Wildlife Fund, Save the Orangutan. There's lots of those. And you can become involved in a small way, either awareness raising in your own neighborhood or, you know, just being aware yourself or contributing. I'm not asking people to contribute, but, you know, there are ways that people can become involved in this fight. And then the other thing is, I suppose we just need to I think awareness is the first thing. And as we said in the video also, you know, palm oil production is not going to stop. But if it is sustainably used, we have a better chance. We talked about identifying genetic signatures among certain palm trees so that the more prolific palm trees will be able to produce more. So if they can grow palm trees that can deliver twice the amount of palm oil that a single palm tree can grow now at the moment, then as the older trees dry out, these can be replaced. And that's selective. That means less forest needs to be cleared to grow this product. So that's also an option. I know it's down the line, but there are different ways. And I think the important thing is the more awareness there is, the more people are likely to change both their own habits and then put pressure on companies. I'm not going to buy your product unless it's from a sustainably managed forest or whatever. So I think that's
yeah.
Obviously, we're not in the field.
By the way, here I am with my my keep cup. As you said, it's a bit of an issue in COVID at the moment. But just you mentioned the fight and people joining NGOs, you know, to join the fight. So is the fight continuing to protect orangutans in their habitats, or, you know, are we getting on top of that?
I don't know if we're getting on top of it or not, but I mean, there's more awareness now than there was a number of years ago. And I think there's more of an appetite worldwide to fight the good fight for lots of reasons. Climate change, you know, is huge. We saw with the demonstrations on Fridays with all the school kids coming out. That's an important part of what's going on in the world. And habitat destruction is contributing to climate change, as we all know. So that's one of the byproducts of climate change. If we keep destroying our habitats, you know, we are going to have catastrophic climate change. So now people have a voice, young people have a voice, we hope. And now I believe the US are coming back into the Paris climate talks. So that's all good. Hopefully. So with just one other question to you, Felicity. I mean, if we all adopt a policy of shop local, you know, that's a good starting point. But obviously, there are a lot of essential products that we probably, or maybe I'm wrong in saying that, but we assume that there are products that we consume or that we need daily, which obviously are not produced locally. So how best can we maintain a shop local policy, you know, to reduce the impact of the destruction of the rainforest? The question is, what do we need? Do we need to have virgin olive oil? Do we need to have palm oil? I mean, if you drive around this country, you'll see the most beautiful fields of yellow. Have we all seen those? And that's rapeseed. And that's wonderful, really, really good rapeseed oil. As a matter of fact, I have a extra virgin rapeseed oil here that was made in Wicklow. I mean, we can replace palm oil in this country. And we're then supporting a sustainable Irish industry. So there's no ecological footprint. We're not shipping them halfway across the world. They're not being brought in airplanes. They're not being brought in big, massive shipping containers. So that's less damage to the environment as well. Now, you know, the more we choose, and we don't have everything. I believe we make some wine here. We don't have, you know, wine. We don't have lots of things. But, you know, how much do we need? What did our parents, I mean, if you went back 50 years ago, our parents, our families, they lived sustainably. They ate what was in season and they ate locally, and they bought from the local farmer or they bought from the local shop who was supplied by the local farmer. And, you know, the more we can go back to that, and of course, growing your own food as well. Simple things. We can all grow lettuce. Cost you £2 for a lettuce in the shop. You can grow, for £2, you could grow 200 lettuces with the seeds. I mean, you know, it's about a mindset, it's about thinking. And simple things. I have a garden, but I don't grow all my own food, but I grow a few things. And you grow the flowers, and you can do things like that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people this year, in the year of 2020, COVID and all of that, have you know, obviously looked at sustainability and are beginning to have their own vegetable patches, and you know, it's therapeutic on top of everything else. Stay with us there, Felicity. I'm joined also by Paul Fritters, who you saw in the video there earlier. Hi, Paul. Hello, Paul. Hello there.
Yes,
how are you? I hope you weren't. I hope it's not that we put you asleep or anything like that. So it's good to know that you're actually there.
The questions were coming in, so I was busy on the background.
Okay, yeah. Well, actually, before maybe you have a couple of questions that you might want to help me with throughout before we finish up to some of the other speakers. I'm really interested in grafting, and you were showing us how that worked earlier on. Why is it? What are the reasons for grafting? Why is it so important, Paul?
Okay, yeah, grafting is important for the industry in order to produce plants very quickly. So if you have a big root system and then you graft a little shoot on top of it, you can effectively produce a plant, a mature plant, much quicker. But apart from being commercial only, it also, for some plants, it's the only way. So if you have a nice tree that came from seed, say, and it's very exceptionally good, then if you take seed from that, it mightn't be as good. You know, there's always variation when you take seed and you grow them up. But if you want to keep this fantastic tree going, you could graft it on top of a rootstock. And because the graft, the cyanwood, the bit that you put on top, effectively will form the new tree, what you see above ground, it looks like you have another tree of that type. Another very good reason commercially that they do grafting a lot is sometimes the rootstock, you know, the bit underground is the bit that has a big influence on whatever you stick on top. So for apple trees, they have rootstocks, and for pears and all kinds of fruits, rootstocks that keeps the tree small. And that has turned out to be very beneficial because those trees fruit quicker, easier picking, and also quicker to replace if the taste of whatever fruit people want changes. So that's another good reason. And then the last one could be that the rootstock is resistant to diseases in the soil or things like that. So there's a good few reasons why you might want to graft.
It's very beneficial. Okay, I know, Paul, you've been kind of filtering some of the questions that have been coming in from our panelists there. I mean, I have them here as well, but maybe you want to pick out one or two and put them to some of your colleagues there.
Okay, yes.
Well, I know, I'll get started. There was one from Matthew. Matthew, what's the most dangerous plant in Ireland?
Yes, exactly.
Gosh, it's probably some of the introduced garden plants. There are a lot of very toxic garden plants we have, but you know, historically, I suppose things like deadly nightshade, very toxic, but the number of people who die from them each year is minuscule. You know, some of the greatest dangers are actually the physical danger of climbing a tree. Falling coconuts are another major cause of injuries in the tropics when people doze under palm trees. But yes, plants are amazing in how many of them are incredibly toxic. So deadly nightshade, which I mentioned, has got the ability, you know, to put us to sleep very quickly, and we will be dead from ingesting a large quantity of it. Likewise, there are other plants such as yew trees, highly toxic to grazing animals, especially when the branches have been broken off a tree. So when cattle and horses can live with a yew tree in their paddock for many, many years, and it's only when somebody breaks off branches or the wind snaps a branch off that horses unfortunately don't realize what they're ingesting, and that will stop their heart very, very quickly. So yes, we have a range of toxic plants, but rest assured that usually these are very bitter. We know that it pays for the plant to know that if they are toxic, they make themselves incredibly astringent or bitter in flavor so that animals don't eat them.
Right, that's very kind of them. Colin, another question here. What percentage of the herbarium is of native plants?
So about, I answered that actually on the just typing in, but about 100,000 vascular plants. So we have 600,000, roughly 600,000 specimens. And of those, about 100,000 are vascular. Now, when I say vascular, I mean what everybody thinks of as a plant, not basically what would be called cryptogams, these little small mosses and things. So they would add on probably another 50, 60,000. And then we have fungi and algae as well on top of that. But in terms of when you go out into a field, what you see is mainly vascular plants, about 100,000. And they are most, the most complete collection in a way, that they're the most well documented, and we can get the most out of them in a way.
All right, Paul, we have a couple of minutes left. Any other questions have come in there that you want to throw out to your colleagues?
Okay, well, there was one that I can answer myself is what can people do themselves to support biodiversity? And this is something that I teach in biodiversity as a subject. So what can you do in your garden? And it would be planting native plants. So there's loads of plants that are coming from abroad and might not be as good for biodiversity. For instance, planting a few oaks and a few birches, trees that are native in Ireland would probably support far more biodiversity. Also, if you want to have flowers, which we all do, plant things with simple flowers that the bees have access to, so that there is more nectar for them to enjoy, and that would, again, stimulate biodiversity. There's loads of things, and one of the things you can most easily do, well, not easily, but it has the biggest effect, is make a pond, have water in your garden, have as many different kind of habitats in your garden as possible, so more and more animals as well as plants can live there. So a pond would be good. And what I like to say myself as well, don't be so clean. Leave things go wild, leave things go a bit messy, and for every different animal that will be another habitat to live, and that will include more different types of plants as well.
Okay, and I'm going to go back finally to both Felicity and Nolan, and I think it's a common question you're probably asked, and I think we've had a couple of questions in like this. What got you involved, Nolan, in the whole area of horticulture? How did you get into it?
I kind of fell into it, yeah. It's kind of brings me on a new journey every day. I suppose I started off, I grew up in the countryside, so surrounded by plants, very lucky. But also kind of growing up, my nana had a farm as well. So I kind of seen both sides. I also worked in local nurseries, so I started learning plant names. I loved plant names. And then things developed for me, and I suppose I just love plants. I'm fascinated by them. I as Matthew said, you can't go for a walk, but you see a plant, there's some new thing to see. And I suppose the fact that all our lives depend on them, as Colin said, I mean, they provide the air, they provide the food. I think there's just no end to, what you can find about plants. I just love them all. Yeah.
And Felicity, briefly to you as well. I mean, is it more of a vocation and a love than a job?
Well, I suppose we work in the most beautiful place in the country, really. So that has helped enormously. This is my second career. My first career was in the performing arts. And then I came back and studied horticulture. And I fell into explaining the role of plants and the importance of plants by accident, really. But it's been a fantastic journey. And now we have a great team of people and guides. And anybody who wants to come and learn more about the gardens, they can take guided tours. And we really kind of try to explore the importance of plants all of the time and just explaining them to people. And we hope by explaining, people will have an empathy to nature, and then they will in turn be able to act more sustainably in their life.
Sure. Okay. And, on that note, I think it's a good way to actually finish, to remind people that are participating today that it's never too late. If you want to do a course, go to teagasc.ie, to the website there, and you can find out about maybe how you can pursue a career in horticulture, maybe do a part-time course as well. Guys, you've been brilliant. Thank you. You can go off now and have your sustainable coffee and relax after all your hard work. And really well done. And thanks so much for having us there in the Botanic Gardens a couple of weeks ago. And as I said earlier on, thanks to all the staff in the Botanic Gardens and the OPW for their help in putting that little video together earlier on. Now, tomorrow we're back at the same time between 11 and 12. Remember, this is free and sustainable farming. Sorry, I'm coming, that's on the day after, but the Johnstown Castle Estate in County Wexford tomorrow. I'm jumping ahead of myself. Tomorrow, Tuesday, that is going to be our venue, and that's going to be the focus for tomorrow's presentation, which will be about soil health is our wealth. So we'll have experts there from Johnstown. We'll have a little video as well. And again, there'll be an interactive Q&A afterwards. Then on Wednesday, we'll be meeting the scientists from Moore Park down in Fermoy in County Cork. And we'll be looking at sustainable farming, farm to fork. Then on Thursday, Jonathan McCrae will be here. He'll be presenting. And the title of the event on Wednesday between 11 and 12 is Back to the Future. and it will be focused again on Moore Park Food Research Centre there at the Teagasc, and it'll be about the oldest and newest food technologies, and we'll be chatting to the scientists there. And then Jonathan is back again on Friday, and the title of the presentation and webinar on Friday is The Taste of the Future, and it'll be focused on the Teagasc Food Research Centre in Ashtown in County Dublin. There's going to be a little bit of entertainment, a bit of fun as well on a Friday. So remember, this is free, and it's on every day this week between 11 and 12 as part of Science Week. Remember, you can get involved by going to the Teagasc Twitter handle, and you can put your questions to us later on, or indeed tomorrow as we're going along. So I want to thank everybody in the Botanic Gardens. I want to thank all of the organisers of today's event, and I want particularly to thank you. It's wonderful to have so many participants, and I hope you learned a little bit more about the sustainability of plant diversification in Ireland. So until I talk to you at the same time tomorrow, bye-bye.